Greetings, it is I, Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire. Welcome. Today I'm going to talk about BESM, Big Eyes, Small Mouth. I've been continuing my discussions on it. I'm reaching the end of the book. So now I'm getting into a very important section, talking about being a game master in BESM. So now I'm going to talk about something that I'm going to talk about with every system that I talk about. If I talk about it, that you're the storyteller, the dungeon master, the game master, any of them, I want to bring these things up in everyone because they're very important. I'm going to talk about being a GM just for a minute or two. Being a GM is difficult. It really is. It's a challenging thing because you're basically being the storyteller. You're being the architect of the world. Granted, you could be using a pre-made world. You could make your own world. These are things I will talk about in today's episode, especially for BESM, and talking about building your own world and campaigns in BESM. That's going to be the major topic today. But let's skip out that you've got a world set up. You've got everything established in it. Let's talk about running in that game. This is the important thing is, it's hard to throw yourself into it when you haven't been a player first. So I would recommend playing in a game first. Now, you don't actually need to. If you wanted to, you could dive right into GMing. It is an option. It's going to be a little more difficult for you. Some suggestions might be to watch someone else do it. There's actually plenty of people doing just GMing in general online. Any person GMing a game, get an idea of what they're doing. If you don't have this opportunity, there are some things you have to remember. You're in control of the world. You have to make sure to control everybody. That means you're going to have to rein your players in. But don't be stifling. That's the thing you're going to do. You want to rein them in, but you want to do it without stifling them. Your world is a story. That's what you have to think about it is. And so you have to have these characters set in the story, and the characters should act like they should act. If the character acts outside the purview of the story, it doesn't make sense that they're there, and you should sort of rein that person and that character in, because why would someone act that way in any normal circumstance? That's what kind of way you have to think about it. But you're going to try to make sure that everyone has fun in this story. Granted, there could be stories where things are really depressing, things are really dark, but it's the object that people are going to be entertained and have fun at the end of the day, both you and the players. So it's kind of this balancing act of keeping the story and everybody entertained. And you're going to have to find that balancing act. And most systems pretty much say, rules be damned if it keeps things going. Now, granted, the rules are there to make sure to give like a box to keep players in line with effectively, and a box to keep things in a system from going out of control. You're going to have to balance your rules for yourself in the system with how you think things should be going. You can always forget a rule if it helps you, but remember, when you do, you're going to have to keep your consistency. So stick to your guns when you do stuff. It might just be that you're going to keep things cinematic and explain that. Let your characters know that you might be doing things cinematically a couple of times. And that if things seem a little wonky, it's not going to be anything they're going to involve in checks and stuff with. Because when you bring in character interaction and they're going to have to be rolling things, that's when altering and forgetting rules actually hurts the system. When they don't have to roll anything and things just happen, you don't usually have to worry about it. But anyway, that's enough just talking about being a GM. And this was an important thing that I wanted to talk about people with. Let's talk about being a GM in BESM. So there are 3 types of games you can run in BESM. Campaign, mini-campaign, and one-shot. Let's talk about each of them. A campaign is an overarching story. It's a large story. It's an entire adventure. Think of it as a season of anime might be a campaign. That's what you're going to kind of compare it to. And it could be something really long-winded, like you could have like a Naruto-like game where they have hundreds of episodes, that you have a campaign that feels like it could go on for that effective amount of time. Campaigns are the epic story that you're using. You're going to sort of sow the seeds of the overall story in your first session, and then sort of drive your characters into it. And they will themselves have amounts of character developed, not just in getting points and things like that, but developing their actual characters and personalities and how these characters act. And they should develop themselves over the course of these adventures. You're going to be running it in a number of sessions. It'll be session after session, and the amount of time it's going to take will definitely vary, but it's going to be something that at the beginning you establish a story, and you're not going to know where that story is going to end up for either the middle or the end necessarily, because there's going to be many decisions your characters are going to make that will alter it along the way. So though you have an idea of where you want things to end up, it might take an entirely different route to get there because of things. And it's your job to act as like a ringmaster almost, and rein things in so that regardless of how your characters are acting and deciding, you can get them to push to a direction that you maybe want to go, but you should still be flexible, because you keep your things general for long-term plans, because you don't know what your characters are going to do to get there in the first place. You're effectively storytelling on a very epic scale. So after a campaign is a mini-campaign. A mini-campaign is a much smaller scope. You're probably going to be between 5 to 8 sessions, and in the course of these sessions, you're going to have far less character development and more story, and you're still going to have a lot of story development though, but the story's going to be fast. You're most likely going to have either the antagonists, the nemesis, the villains. They're going to probably appear in many of the sessions, and they're going to be a driving point until the last session, where there's a climactic sort of encounter with whatever antagonistic force is there, driving to the end of whatever adventure you're running. Mini campaigns are a lot more prevalent, because when people are restricted on their time, or you don't know if people's schedules are going to change, it's an easier way to get a game in and to have a sort of overarching story without having to worry about throwing it over the course of maybe like years even. There are people that run campaigns for years. Usually it's because they can't get as many sessions in, and so a mini campaign might be a way to do it, depending on the circumstances of your players and how often you can really get them. So the last one I do want to talk about is a one-shot. Now, one-shots are going to be pretty rare, actually, in BESM. One-shots are for times when you're maybe like at a convention, or you're doing some kind of like introductory thing in a game store. That's more the place for them. You can do it in your normal settings, but it's less suggested, because the thing is, you're going to have no character development. There's no time for it. You're going to have a game that's between 3 to 8 hours, depending on how much time you have, and and other circumstances of how much of a story you're actually putting into this time period that will drag on about how much time you have. And maybe your players don't have as much time for that, so you have to make your story fit in the amount of time you have. And it's going to be very action heavy, because you're trying to get everything resolved very quickly. So it's a small, basically, adventure. It would effectively think about a single episode of an anime, but everything's resolved in that one episode. That's more or less what it is. Now, granted, I would say maybe, depending on how long you can have the session go, you could have it maybe be effectively a couple of episodes strung together. You're like an OVA. There's a better way of describing it. A couple episode OVA, and you have to resolve everything very quick, and so that you have to establish everything very quick, and you don't have a lot of time to really throw what a character is out there, because it's up to your players to really establish their characters, and they don't have a lot of time to do that, because they're going to be going into the action often and very quickly to get everything resolved. So one-shots are definitely not suggested in this case. There are always times and places for one-shots. And granted, you can play a one-shot if you really want to. You could run one. If you have some kind of smaller adventure that you want to have planned and you want to throw it together very quickly, that's fine. It's going to be your choice how to do it. But I would recommend, if you want something shorter, stick to a mini campaign. It's a little better. BESM relies on character development a little more than other systems, and definitely personality. It's the kind of thing, because it is an anime-based game, you want a lot more personality to your characters. And it gives your players more chances to do so. And if you especially don't want to run as something as long as a campaign, mini campaigns are your way to go. But again, any of them are your choice. Now, when we talk about the questions of how many sessions you're going to have, that's the thing we're going to think about next, because this is going to help you narrow down what kind of campaign you want to do. You're going to have to ask a few questions. First off is, how much time do your players have? How often could they meet? Is it once a month? Is it once a week? Is it a couple times a week? These are questions that will help determine how many sessions you could really put together. Then are these people new? Or have they played together? People that have played together oftentimes role play better together. They can develop their characters easier with each other. On the other hand, if they're all new players, then they might have to take more time learning the system and stuff, and a shorter game might be more suggestible to get them acclimated. Now, the last question you want to ask is really, how much role-playing do you really want in it? How much character development do you want? If you don't want a lot of role-playing and character development, regardless if they're new characters, if they're old characters, if any of those other questions, less role-playing means less sessions usually. You're not going to have to worry about as much of that character. Now, the book lists some genre elements. These are things that aren't quite genres in themselves, but are important elements within genres that you might consider bringing into your game. There's a general listing of them, and it's only a small selection of the actual possibilities that could exist. But it's get you thinking about things that are in an anime game. These are all very anime-type things that you might have to bring into your game. Granted, they don't change what your game is. They don't alter a lot of things in the game. They are elements within your game. Now let's talk about establishing your world setting. The first thing you kind of want to look at is the period of time it's going to take place in. There is any period of time. You could be like in ancient history, like ancient Japan, for example. You could be near to present day, like slightly into the past, 1960s, something like that. You could be present day. You could be near future. You could be a parallel alternate future. You could be distant to the future. The time period and sort of what it reflects is an important decision in it, because you could also do like medieval fantasy. That's actually sort of a time period. It's an alternate world time period of medieval past. That's your fantasy game. And establishing that is a very good point in time where you kind of get an idea of the type of people, the type of abilities, the type of technology that is around, and it's a very good starting point. After that, you want to look at the basic genres of it. What the basic genre would be is, are you doing an action game? Are you doing a drama? Are you doing a comedy? Are you doing a romance? Or are you doing some kind of mixture of these? Because you could do that. You could do a game which is an action romance. Think about that. It would have romantic elements. You're probably going to have, romantic relationships with your characters, maybe with each other or NPCs, and a lot of action going around. And it gives a sort of tone for what you're aiming for when you're designing your world in this setting that you've already chosen. In the period you've already chosen, you've now chosen what kind of game you want to run. After this, you have to look to the concepts and themes of your game. These are the other genres. When I'm talking about my BESM and Anime World series, when I'm talking about the animes that I list the genres, I list from the most top-of-the-line genres like romances to very obscure genres, let's say like a school. That tells you things. This is where the concepts and the themes comes in. It tells you important things that are maybe not like the broad genre terms like drama or romance, but they are very important to the genre and the game you're playing itself. It could be an important concept is the school in your world. If you're doing a modern day world where the important concept is school, you've already established you're having a game set at a school, that everything is going to revolve around this school, whatever's happening. So it's a very important concept, not just a location in your world. Now, let's talk about building your world, because that's the next thing you're going to have to do, is to build the world you're playing in. You're going to have to come up with a lot of things. First off, you want to come up with a cast of characters. This is any kind of NPC. This can be friends, lovers, significant others, villains, antagonists, any kind of other character that would be very important to your world, you have to build. Granted, you don't always have to stat them out fully, depending on if they're going to be people that may have to get in a fight or fight with your players, or might be doing kind of skill checks or things like that. Competing. I guess fighting is not the best word for it. Competing or getting into situations where they would be against each other or with each other, that they would require dice rolls also, then I would build their characters out and probably use similar rules that the players did. If they're a villain, of course you give them more points more than likely, because they should come together to overcome the villain. There's no real guideline to how many you're going to give them. It's completely up to you and what you want to have them reflect. If they're going to be like overpowering and they have to get stronger in the course of the adventure, or they're going to be slightly more powerful and maybe just them coming together and figuring out how to work together would be enough to defeat them. It sort of also reflects the amount of time you're going to have, the difference between that. A more overpowering enemy, of course, the characters are probably going to need more time to overcome, rather than someone that's just slightly more powerful, less time. So once you've established the cast of characters in your world, you have to add in any organizations you think would be important to this world. This could anything be from like a secret government organization, the SWAT team, school clubs, an organization which reflects a hierarchy within your world that your characters will be involved with in some way. This could be an antagonistic organization or a friendly one. It's completely up to you how you're going to build these organizations, but it's important to your game. Of course, then you're going to have to look at some very important concepts. What kind of powers are in your world? What kind of races are in your world? Are they non-human, non-stellar? What kind of technology is in your world? These are three very important questions. Like the powers, is there magic? Is there psychic powers? For technology, are you in the distant past? Are you in the normal world? Are you in the far future? For the races, are there just humans? Or are there non-human races? They're very important questions you have to answer about your world when you're building it. Now there is other details when it comes to world building that we want to talk about, but I will talk about more of them next time. I've gone over some of the basics to help you start building your world. So that's it for today. I've gone over the basics of being a GM. I've gone over the basics of building whatever kind of campaign you want to run and what type of campaign it is, and asking some important questions when beginning to design it. And I went over some of the basic design elements you're going to look into when you're figuring it out. And now, I will note that if you're trying to mimic an anime, you're using them to figure out whatever any of these concepts are. Or if you're doing it by yourself, you're homebrewing it, you basically would figure out each of these ones along the line on your own. Either way, you're making these choices and beginning to build your world. So, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think left out, leave it in the comments below. Please like this video, shows your support for the channel, Empire, work I do. Please subscribe if you already haven't, or you're looking for more members, more citizens of Empire. And please share this video. If you know anybody who would learn anything from it, or would just enjoy watching it, please share it. And until next time, I bid you farewell.